Welcome everyone, this is Zonta with Repo Products. Today's video is a study on how to look at curtain walls and experimenting with them for the uses of walls and special panels and roofing and things of that sort. I have Revit 2019 open and I have a whole bunch of examples here of different ways to approach and work with curtain walls. Let's start from the upper left-hand side here. When you start the wall command in Revit and you go to the type selector, they give you a few to work with as a starting point. You have curtain wall 1, you have exterior glazing, and you have storefront. Now, if I were to select this first panel, you can see this one is called curtain wall 1, and this is nothing more than an empty panel. And you can see the definition and the type properties. There is practically nothing defined in the sense of the vertical grid lines, horizontal grid lines, the panels. It's just a plain sheet that you can use the curtain grid command and the mullion command to start creating your own set and own custom type of vertical curtain wall. If we take a look at the second one, this one is called exterior glazing. It's very similar to the first one. The difference is it has some information already set up for it. For example, the vertical grids and the horizontal grids. And so if you go inside here and make changes to some type of layout, for example, changing the fixed distance to say 4 feet on the vertical and changing maybe the fixed distance on the spacing to be 6 feet on the horizontal and clicking apply, you'll see that format changes right there. Okay, and there are different layout methodologies as well. Fixed distance, fixed number, minimum and maximum spacing. If we take a look at the third one, you can see when you select it, this one's called storefront. And if we go to its type properties, a lot of information is automatically set up for us. We've got the curtain panel being defined for all of the panels, the join condition, the vertical grid and horizontal grid layouts, and even the mullions that are being used. Again, this is out of the box for you to use to create vertical curtain walls. Now, we also know, before we go deeper, that as you hover your mouse over an entity, it'll highlight. If this is not what you want, you can hit Tab, and it will cycle through what it can find. Once you cycle through what you want to find by hitting Tab each time, it'll highlight what it can find. If you need to, I can zoom in and you can see further. And I can pick something, for example, the grid line. And for the storefront default curtain wall, everything is pinned down. So this grid line is pinned down. So if I want to change this distance, I need to unpin this, and then I can change this value, and everything will adjust accordingly. Same thing applies with the mullions. If I select it, it's pinned down, and you'll notice that the type selector is grayed out. So if I unpin it, then I can actually go to the type selector and pick something else and use its profile. And we'll get deeper into this, don't worry. Now let's have a little bit of fun. This next particular curtain wall is actually not a curtain wall. This is just a glass wall. It is a curtain wall called glass wall railing, and if we go to its type properties, you're going to see that it's a curtain wall that's using a curtain panel that's glazed, and it has a fixed distance for the vertical spacing, and then it also has a interior type for the vertical mullion that's being used as well. So if you use this kind of approach and just specify this information, you could actually make it act like a glass wall with railings to a degree. You can also create a generic family that is wall-based with an opening that you can also insert and nest in a family that looks like a railing, and then when you place it on the wall, it cuts into the wall just like doors and windows, and you can place that quote-unquote baluster wherever you need, and then organize it accordingly to make it look like a glass low wall with railings. Now let's look at this one. I'm going to zoom in because it's pretty fine. As you can see here, we've got corrugated paneling. If I were to select this, we can see that the entire entity is selected. It's called Curtain Wall Corrugated Panel 1. If I go to the type properties, you're going to see that the curtain panel that's defined is empty. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to specify the vertical grid as being a certain distance. In this case, it's 2 inches. And it has a vertical mullion that's being used, that's a custom one called Mullion Profile A. And because the specific custom mullion is applied and being used in this situation and repeated every 2 inches, it looks like the typical corrugated metal panel that's really tightly knit. If we go over to the project browser and head over to our profiles and our curtain panels, under here where it says curtain wall mullions, we have the Mullion Profile A. So how was this created? What I did was I took a rectangular mullion, right click, and I created a new type. Once that was done, I renamed it and I went to its type properties. In the type properties window for Mullion Profile A, we have a custom profile that's being used called Mullion Profile A. Now, how do you create that custom mullion profile and load it into the project? If I can select it, I can actually try to tab into it to get to it. And if I can't get to it, then I'll actually have to open up that specific family. So let's head over to my computer, head over to my temp drive, and we have the Mullion Profile A. And let's open that up and look at it. This custom curtain profile called Mullion Profile A is nothing more than this shape here that's drawn with line work. Okay, and I have placed it centered where I want it to be, and I gave it a specific distance of 2 inches end to end. That's why the vertical spacing is 2 inches. This profile here is just something I came up with. You can actually pull from the manufacturer's website and find the specific profile that you need and use that in its place. Once you've created it, and again, how was that created initially? When you click New, this button here, it wants to create a new project. You'll need to go to File, New, Family. Here, you want a curtain wall mullion profile. So if we head down to Profiles, you'll see there's one called Profile Mullion A. And so you can even see from the preview that it looks just like the one I did earlier. So if I click Open, then it gives this to you, and I can load in or insert or draw from scratch the profile that I want for that panel. Once that's done, you save it and load it into the project. Once it's loaded, then go back over here where you created that profile type and make sure that it is defined here under Profiles. Okay? Now, for this particular panel wall, it looks a little zigzag, and the only reason is because I clicked Edit Profile and I changed the magenta sketch line so that it has this jog. That's all. Now, let's take a look at this one. This one's kind of funky. It's huge. This one's called Curtain Wall Exterior Glazing. Now, here's the thing. Be very careful when you're working with curtain walls, because if we select this one over here that we were playing with earlier, it also is called curtain wall glazing. But the definition of the panel has changed, and I did not look at it and be very specific about it. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to the type properties of it, and I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this a bamboo wall. Now that we've done that, we're going to change our fixed distance for vertical layout to say 1 foot, and then hit OK, and it will adjust, as you can see here. And then we're going to do it again, but this time specify the horizontal, say maybe 2 feet instead. And now we're starting to get this ribbed looking effect for this bamboo wall. Okay, now this bamboo wall, how was this particular profile created? It was done using a curtain panel family and creating what's known as a blend. So if we head over to File, New, Family, we'll pick Curtain Panel Wall, and we click OK. And we'll open that up. And what you're seeing here is the plan view, and you want to draw that blend, if you will. And let's look at it from an exterior perspective. That's the top of the panel. This is the bottom of the panel. This plane is already defined as being reference level. This one has already been given to us, and it's called top. So if you want to, we can start with the reference level, head over to the Create tab, and do the blend command. When we do the blend command, we're editing the bottom. That's why edit top is available for us to jump to the top reference plane and draw the top profile. Right now we're going to draw the bottom profile. So let's use, say, this start end radius here, and we'll do start end and then give it some type of radius. We can then draw using the pick line method with some type of thickness offset. Let's do 1/2 inch. And then draw that. I'm going to zoom in and draw the remaining line work. And I'm going to lock that face and make sure that this is cleaned up corner to corner. Okay? And then we head over to this side and we draw a vertical line as well and lock that as well. Now this is the profile for the bottom. Let's switch to the top. So click Edit Top, and before you start drawing it, you have to set that top plane. So click Set and verify that you're jumping to the top plane so you can draw on that top plane. And then again draw the arc for the top part, which is going to be a different curvature. So I'm going to click here, and maybe draw just a little shallower like this, or even more. I'm going to go a little shallow. And again, draw using the pick line method and 1/2 inch. And then zoom in again and make sure you finish drawing that sketch. Remember, when you're in sketch mode, you're drawing it so that the sketch is a closed loop. Okay, there are no gaps, there's no overlaps, there are no straight lines anywhere. And don't forget to lock the planes. That way the reference lock the line work. That way the lines move, which is the face of that, with the reference planes. Now that that's created, if I head over to the exterior elevation and I finish, you'll notice that the panel is created. We do need to pull that down so that it's aligned and locked to that top plane. And the bottom. A lot of people forget to move and adjust the bottom and align and lock. If we look at this in 3D, this is what you get. This is a very shallow type of curvature. But that's just basically, in essence, what you have. You save the file, load it back into the project, and then you can use it for your design, which is what you see over here. This one in particular is using a thicker shape, and the curvature is there's a sharper radius. There's a lot more of a radius. That way it looks a little more curved. Okay, now let's look at the next wall type that we're playing with, and this one is here. And if I select it, it's called curtain wall 2x4 wood stud wall curtain wall method. What's going on with this one? If we go to the type properties, we can see that the curtain panel is a glazed panel. It has a vertical grid of 2 foot fixed distance spacing, and it's using a custom vertical mullion that's called 2x4 wood studs. Okay, and in this case, the custom 2x4 wood studs is nothing more than a rectangle. Okay, 1.5 by 3.5. And so once you've drawn it and you've assigned it, you'll get your vertical, you'll get your horizontals. Now, using this method, however, for the horizontals, you'll notice that it draws them, and it will want to draw them across all of them. And so you may need to take certain ones that you have, and you may need to delete them. So for example, here, if you're trying to create a staggered type of situation, you can delete the ones that you don't need. The good thing using this method is that you can still click the toggling of the mullion joins so that they can go through if you want the horizontals to go through, or leave them the way they are because as it stands now, the verticals are continuous. Lastly, we have this wall type, and if we select this, it's called Caribbean wall. And if we go to its type properties, you'll notice that it has a custom curtain panel called Custom Caribbean Panel Wall. And it has the vertical spacing as well defined. And if we scroll down, there are no vertical mullions or horizontal mullions. So how was this created? If we tab into one of the panels, you can see that you can click Edit Family right here. And when I edit this family, this is the family itself. This is a standard curtain panel family. If I go to the plan view, you will notice that it has that specific panel that's drawn, and it has a specific type of material and a basket type weaving pattern, so it makes it look that way. However, here, this is actually a family that's been nested into this particular family. This excuse me, nested family is called Custom Mullion for Caribbean Wall. And if I click Edit Family again, it opens up that particular family, and you can see it's just a simple generic model type of object that's drawn with extrusions, vertical, horizontal, and you can see how it looks. Okay, so you've got a vertical member, you've got a horizontal member, and then you've got this little pattern right here for signage or whatever the case may be. Okay, I didn't particularly finish this one. I could put in additional extrusions for each of these open panels so that they can have like signage in them. But once this family is created, I just loaded it into the curtain panel family that you see right here. And I placed it and I aligned and locked it to that plane right here, as well as this one over here. Now, once you've gone ahead and created that specific curtain panel, again, save it and load it into your project. And once it's loaded into the project, assign it to that particular curtain wall. And this is what you get. Now, let's take a look at a roof type situation where you're creating a custom corrugated panel and you're assigning it to that sloped glazing roof, and what happens when things get altered. So if I take a look at this roof, this is the standard sloped glazing roof. However, I went into the properties of it and I told it to use a specific empty panel, and then I told it to use specific interior and border types for the mullions. Okay, and they're called mullion profile A and B. So let's go back and open up mullion profile A and profile B. This is A, which is just this one little segment right there, and it's repeated or used accordingly. And if we go to profile B, you can see that this one actually shows a panel with a little bit of a bend right here, so that when the next panel joins up to it, it creates that effect. So depending on which specific custom curtain panel mullion you're working with, or panel that you're creating, once you've created them and loaded them, you can go ahead and assign them, and then they'll get drawn and placed accordingly. However, when you look at this type of methodology, we zoom in, we can see here we've got that custom mullion profile B that's being used, and it knows how to clean up the ends over here very, very nicely. However, when the panel spacing is too narrow or things don't end very well on the ends, you'll get weird situations, and so I actually had to delete those panels. So let's go ahead, just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to head over here and I'm going to go head over to level 2, even though I didn't call it roof, level. It's okay. I'm going to create a roof, and I'm going to use the generic 12-inch for now and draw just a little roof like this. And let's look at this in 3D. If I select this and I switch it to the slope glazing, this is the effect that I get. Okay? You'll notice that these here work very nicely because they end such that it can get built very well. But when it gets to weird situations like this, it can't build it because it's just too much of a change in the geometry. So what I ended up having to do is to select it, unpin it, and delete it. And you have to go through and delete the panels that don't work because of the design of the spacing. Things are going to adjust on you. Okay? And so if we kind of rotate about, we can see where certain panels just don't work. Like, for example, that panel doesn't work. And we can unpin it and delete it. And even this one, you see how everything gets shifted and adjusted? This is kind of the default nature of Revit's functionality when you're trying to use it this way. And it will hold and leave the panels that it can make. Okay? And this is what I'm left with. So let me finish cleaning this up for a second. And again, you may need to use the tab key to tab into and pick the ones that are not working properly. Okay? Now, this is what I'm left with, which means I have to fix all of the holes. The way to fix it is what's known as an adaptive curtain panel, and that's what you see over here. And the adaptive curtain panel is based upon adaptive points. So if I scroll down under the project browser and head over to my generic models, you're going to see that I have 3-point and 6-point and 4-point adaptive component panels. Using those, I can actually specify the points here, here, and here for a 3-point adaptive panel, and it will place that panel there. This panel in particular that I created, if we were to tab into it and select it, it's called a 3-point adaptive curtain panel. And if we go to the type properties, there's not much that you can see and work with. If I head over to the project browser and select the top level and click edit, I can actually open that family up. So now I'm in the conceptual massing environment family, and I have the 3 adaptive points right here, and it has a frame and it has a piece of glass. So how was this created? If I were to tab into the geometry and select it, and I click dissolve, you'll see that it's made up of, and I'm going to delete this particular flat panel. You're going to see that it's made up of reference lines and 3 reference points that are adaptive. The adaptive points actually have numbers, and the numbers help you understand how many clicks that you have to make and the sequence of clicks. So this one has 3, so I'm clicking 1, 2, 3, and it places the panel. If I have the numbering sequence as 1, 2, and then 3, that means I'm picking here, and then over here, and then over here. So depending on the orientation of the panel that you're working with, you may have to adjust the numbering sequence of when to pick, and it'll be a bit more prevalent when you do a higher number of adaptive points. In this particular 3-point adaptive component curtain panel family, there is a rectangular profile over here, and that was drawn on a point. And if I go ahead and select the point, I can see it, and I can actually go over to the properties panel and change it so that it can show the reference plane at all times. The reason I'm showing this to you is because when you select that plane, it becomes the current plane. You don't actually have to click set and touch it, or click set and pull it from a drop-down list. You need that plane to be the current plane so that you can draw that profile on that plane. Once it's done, if you select the profile sketch and you hold Control and pick the reference lines, then you can click Create Form, and it knows to basically do a sweep. So it takes that rectangle and it sweeps it along the 3 reference planes, and it creates the frame, if you will. If I select just the reference lines and I click Create Form, the command knows to either tell you to use the extrusion command to make a thick extrusion like this, or do a surface. In this case, I'm going to tell it to do a surface. Once the surface is created, you can then select it. You can adjust the thickness with the arrows, or you can also click Material over here in the Properties panel, drill into the Materials dialog box, and specify some type of material, in this case glass. And it looks like this. Once it's created, you can go ahead and click Load into Project, and it gets loaded. Since I already have it loaded, I'm not going to save it, and I'm not going to reload it. How do I place it? That's the key. When I go to place in a 3-point or 6-point or whatever number of points adaptive family, go over to the project browser, right-click the one you want to work with, and click Create Instance. Since this is a 3-point, it needs 3 points. Be very careful. Look in the contextual ribbon. You'll see it says Place on Face or Place on Work Plane. The Place on Face command is a little bit more forgiving if things get altered or adjusted. For example, the slope of the roof changes from a 4 and 12 to say 6 and 12 or 9 and 12. If you choose Place on Work Plane, it holds to that plane. So if the plane was drawn at that angle and the angle slope changes because the slope changes, the reference plane doesn't move and it stays put. So the adaptive panel stays put. In this case, you want it to be on the face. Since I've already drawn it over here, I'm just going to draw 1, 2, 3 to give you an idea what a 3-point adaptive curtain panel looks like. And the reason they say adaptive is because I can push and pull these points, and it will adjust the shape accordingly based upon a 3-point design. In the same respect, you have the 4-point and 6-point that I created. So let's go ahead and edit that family so you can see what it looks like. So if I zoom in here, same approach, same design. The only difference is it has 6 points instead of 3 points. And which means that I have to be careful about the sequence of picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If my sequence is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like zigzag, it's not going to work. And it'll break on you. Okay? So once you have the 6 panel created, load it back into the project and then use it accordingly. If I go over to the 6-point and I right click and I say create an instance, it's going to ask me for 6 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it knows to build it. Okay? If I zoom in so you can see, and I pick any one of those points, I can push and pull. And that's what makes this interesting. Because it's adaptive, you can reshape it. Okay? Now, let's take a look at finally, if I were to take this roof, that's a slope glazing roof, and change its slope from 9 to 12 to say 6 and 12, does everything adjust accordingly? It looks like it did. But be very cautious, because once you make that kind of a slope change, the spacing of this may change, which may cause a panel to go strange, and so you'll have to adjust it accordingly. So let's zoom in a little bit. You can see that this panel here is using that profile B. Okay, for this one, it's really hard for the adaptive component families to create them so that it has this corrugated design. I tried experimenting with it earlier and I couldn't get it to work, and the reason is because you have to remember that the profile that's drawn has to be on this plane and has to extrude vertically. When you start working with adaptive paneling, it can't be that rigid. It can't have a single path going this way, because this gets adjusted, that point gets adjusted, this point gets adjusted, and therefore that linear path is no longer linear for an extrusion. So the other attempt maybe is to do that with a sweep, but when you're in the conceptual massing environment, you have the create form command, and that automatically tries to pick and use one of those Boolean operations automatically. It doesn't allow you to manually force it to be a sweep, whereas in the family editor environment, you can force it to be a sweep. But in the family editor environment, you can't do an adaptive curtain panel. That has to be done in the conceptual massing environment. So this has been, I know, kind of a long video, longer than I normally do, but this is a way for you to understand how to use Revit to create different walls with a curtain wall command and custom curtain panels, and different approaches, whether it's a vertical or angled. And then lastly, I didn't do anything in regards to, say, a surface that's curved. So let's do that real quick. We'll head over to New Conceptual Mass, and I'll do this quickly because we want to create a surface that's curved. So I'll use this command here. Select this, click Create Form. It creates a curved surface. I'm going to pull that up, and I'm going to pull that so that that face is curved, as you can see here. So let's load that into the project. Turn on the visibility, and then we'll place it. We'll place it over here. And let's go look at this in 3D. Now, I know that's pretty large, but we'll get the point. If I head over to the current system command, I can pick a current system to work with. In this case, they only give you the 5x10. So if I pick this and click Create System, then it creates it automatically for us. Now, how do we change this and adjust this? Let's select it and go to that current system. We're going to duplicate this, call it whatever we want. We'll just call it Experiment. And if we go into the properties, we can start changing things here. So let's change the curtain panel and see what our choices are. We have barrel tile, so let's try the barrel tile and hit OK and see what happens. So that it did not work for us because that curtain panel for barrel tile is using a blend, and a blend still is a linear based type of Boolean operation, so things get all kind of awry and messed up. Let's try, for now, we'll just do a glazed one, and then we're going to change the fixed distance to say 8 feet for vertical, and we'll leave these numbers for fixed distance. Let's jump over to the mullions. Let's switch this for the interior mullion to be one of the ones that are custom, say mullion profile B, and hit apply. If I click OK and zoom in, we can see what's happening. So some of the panels, it does adjust and it does change. But again, remember, this panel is still a profile that is extruded in one path, one direction. So it's going to look a little strange. Let's go back to that and let's make some adjustments. Let's do the, for the vertical, let's make this 12 and hit apply. Now you can see that the grid 1 is the big glazing here. Let's change this value to 1 foot and hit apply. So this is where you have to experiment and you have to make adjustments to the design so that it stretches and it pulls the entities for the panels themselves to get it to how you want it to look. This may work, it may not work. It just depends on the profile that you're dealing with and the number of divisions. The higher the number of divisions for vertical and horizontal spacing will dictate whether it can do it or it can't do it. Okay? So here you can see it's trying to do it, and you get some weird panelization going on. Okay? Now lastly, I'm going to pan back out. Let's try to select the entire curtain system, not the grid line. And head over to the type properties again. Because that spacing is a foot, there's a lot of repetition. See that? And let's change the grid 2 to say none. And that will reduce the number of calculations that it has to do. And it will delete the horizontal grid lines. And it will readjust the panels for us to make it look a little bit smoother. And then lastly, we're going to switch this from glazed to empty. So it just gets rid of the glazing itself. And now let's zoom in. So you can see it's trying to build it, but now we have a weird situation because it's changed it to an angle for the panels because it's trying to turn it at the same time. See, if we look down here, it's trying to keep that edge straight, but it also is trying to bend with the curvature of the actual mass object, and that's where it gets messed up. So you got to really kind of work with your curtain panels and what kind of panel you're working with and how you want to adjust it to make it look proper, or at least the way you want. If I were to take this and switch this back to say doing none and making this say a glazed panel and hit apply, then this is what I get. You see? So this has been unfortunately kind of a little longer video than I wanted to, but I really wanted to make sure you guys got a chance to understand how Revit functions and what you have to work with to make different types of walls and different ways to approach thinking about using the custom panels and the adaptive panels. I did create an article and a blog, and it's online. If you go to admin community for Autodesk and do a search, you'll find the article that I created called 7 Methods to Create Crazy Walls in Revit. And this will give you what you need. You can also head over to Autodesk Knowledge Network and do a search for me, go under my contributions, and look for an article called Revit Walls, Alternative Approach to Design and Creation. It's a PDF file that you can download. The PDF file looks like this. Then it walks you through the different ways to approach looking at how to use Revit for creating custom walls and using the curtain wall panels and changing out the design. Okay? So thank you very much for watching.